Thank you all for coming. I'd just like to start by acknowledging that we're on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Cowichan people. So I think that's just important to acknowledge where we are today. Before we get started, since this is a small market forum, and both of us specifically didn't want to be talking at you, we wanted it to be more of a general discussion forum. As you can see, there's kind of a congruence there between small and rural. So that's just, we're going to get started now. We're first going to do just some brief introductions and overviews of our market, and then we want to get into the discussion as quickly as possible. So we'll start with Jonathan. Take it away.
I'm Jonathan Knight. I market garden. I have an organic farm in Fitzgerald Valley, which is a bit north of Hazelton, for those who know it. I sell veggies at the Bulkley Valley Farmers Market in Smithers and also at the Hazelton Farmers Market. The Hazelton Farmers Market has been running since 2009, so we've just got 6 seasons so far under a belt. It's been a work in progress, but now it's finally at the level that it is coming into its own. The Hazeltons it's a very rural area for those who don't know it. It's a very spread out area. When we refer to the Hazeltons, that actually refers to 3 separate Hazeltons. There's New Hazelton, Old Hazelton, and South Hazelton. And interspersed throughout the Hazeltons is all the First Nations bits and villages. Over sort of encompassing an area of about 70 kilometers. So we're very spread out. Transportation is very limited throughout the region. We're also known as a very poor region. Hazelton has a reputation as the poorest community in BC. It was largely forestry based. The forestry industry has been declined for the past few decades, and there really isn't any major economic drivers in the area. Traditionally, with the first settlers, it was quite agricultural, and agriculture has also been in decline. So, sort of attendant with poverty comes health problems due to bad nutrition or lack of good food choices. Again, lack of transportation. In the Hazelton communities, there isn't so many food outlets. And to get a wider selection of fresh, healthy food, you have to travel to Smithers or Terrace, which are an hour drive away down the highway. So the market really was able to bring some much needed fresh food to the Hazeltons. So, like I said, we're into our 6th year. We average these past 2 years have been fairly steady. We have about 15 vendors per market. From a total pool of maybe 30 vendors who've been at some point through the season. And from the outset, the market was formed by a group of market gardeners and backyard farmers, and from the very outset we were very determined that the market would be a make-and-grow market and sort of uphold the integrity of what a farmer's market should be. And we have stuck with that through the first years, the first sort of difficult building years, to the point now that the market has a good reputation, and it's worth it for vendors to go there every week to spend their time there and to bring their produce there. And we're probably similar to Smithers, and I think Terrace, we're about 1/3 farm products in the market. So I will pass the floor to Gordon to make his introduction.
Okay. I'll give a bit more background. I moved to Lytton from Vancouver 4 years ago, and the reason that people always ask me, why did you move to Lytton? And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's in the Fraser Canyon, about 3 hours from Vancouver, a very small community, 227 people. And the answer I give is that I went there because of the farmers market. And that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I actually did. My partner and I were driving through to Lillooet, doing the circuit up from Vancouver and back, and we stopped in Lytton because the farmers market was on, and it looked really vibrant. And so we decided to come back and check it out, and as they say, the rest is history. We ended up moving there. I don't really know how it happened, but I've always felt very strongly about the farmers market. I was only ever a shopper at farmers markets in Vancouver. I was never really involved. I was a member, but I was never really involved in it. So we moved up there, and somehow, a couple of years later, the market was no longer vibrant, and we weren't really sure why. It seemed to be every year less and less people, and especially less and less produce. So we started talking to people about it in town, and found out I still don't know the whole story, because everybody has bits and pieces, and it would take forever to learn it all. But we found out that the market had been around for a long time, more than 10 years. And about 10 years ago, it was actually incorporated as a society and became a member of the Farmers Market Association. But before that, it was run more informally for at least 2 years. And it has gone up and down over the years. And one of which probably a lot of you are familiar with, one of the downward spikes that we heard about was when the health board started cracking down. Because before that, there were people making smoothies. There was a lot of First Nations were bringing home canned stuff, and there was a lot of energy there. But after that crackdown, a lot of people left. A lot of vendors left the market, and a lot of people stopped going to the market. Similar to Hazelton, there's very little else in terms of shopping. Well, there's very little in terms of shopping in Lytton. There's a very small grocery store, which is basically a glorified corner store. And you have to go an hour in any number of directions. Basically, if you drive an hour in any direction from there, you come to a somewhat larger town where you could buy organic produce or supplies. But Lytton itself has farms all around it. So we couldn't really figure out why the farmers market was suffering so much. And I mean, some of those people in the farms, a lot of them go to Vancouver because it's only 3 hours away. So we as a process of my partner and I talking to people, we thought, well, we started out helping them. My partner's a visual artist, so we started out helping them doing posters and trying to do things like that. And then we thought, well, maybe I really like espresso, and I had a little home espresso machine. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll just set up a little coffee stand where people can hang out, because there was no place for people to sit down and hang out. And through this process, we eventually ended up becoming the president and vice president before we knew it. And so at that point, we started taking it a bit more seriously. We still had no idea what we were getting into, but started looking up stuff. We found that there was a study about the Lytton Farmers Market from 2006, which done by David Connell up at UNBC, which said that it was, there were hundreds of people coming, and it had thousands of dollars of economic activity in the village at that time. But we also found studies showing how markets decline, and that's where the downward spiral comes in. It's a vicious circle of less and less produce specifically, and less shoppers, and it just gets worse and worse. So we set out to try and rebuild it, essentially. And because the market had been in good straits for quite a while, there was actually a decent surplus that was available. So we bought canopies and invested in banners and things like that to try and make it a bit more lively. And then we started trying to build community partnerships. So that's really the story of where we are right now. And last year we got onto with the Lytton First Nation as the community partner, we got into the nutrition coupon program. So that was a huge step as far as the Lytton market, and we're still struggling, and even with that program, it's still trying to get it off the ground. And I understand that a lot of places have problems the first year, but we're still trying to figure out how to keep going, how to keep the market thriving, building. And so I've been talking with Peter and with people in the association about this, with Elizabeth, explaining the difficulties that small markets have, which is very different than larger markets. And just talking to people here today, the kinds of issues in urban markets of, people trying to sneak through stuff that isn't really farm produce, or, try and make money off the market, that's just like not a problem where we are, because nobody makes money on the market, basically. And we're trying to get it to the point where it is more sustainable, but essentially farmers who need to support their families go elsewhere, and we don't know how to solve that problem. So that concludes the overlong introduction. So we wanted to get right into the discussion, which means everyone. And we came up, Jonathan and I sent a couple of emails back and forth and came up with a few topics. So I'll just go through them quickly, and then we'll start discussing them one by one. This is just our off the top of the head, so please feel free to bring up anything related or completely different. But we sort of came up with some general categories: policy and governance, attracting and keeping vendors, which is the big one for us, engaging with the community, working with nearby markets, again, another issue for us, because we're in all of those towns an hour away, there's other markets that compete for vendors, for shoppers. And Lytton used to be the central. People used to come from Lillooet and from Ashcroft because it was the only farmers market at the beginning. And now, as all of them have developed farmers market, their own farmers markets, which is obviously a good idea, that's made Lytton less sustainable. Just some quick talk about how you can market on a small scale, and other kinds of technologies and capacities. And I think one of the number one issues for small markets is avoiding burnout. And that's why I wanted to put those first two slides on there, where Jonathan is not only the volunteer manager and board member, but he's also the main vendor, the main produce vendor. And it seems in a lot of these small markets, there's one or two people that are doing all of the work. And if they burn out, then the market goes into decline. And I have a sense that that's what happened to a certain degree in Lytton. People started it out with a lot of energy. They lasted a few years, and then they just couldn't do it anymore. And so it went to a down cycle. So those are the points. We can start out the discussion, I guess, on some of these points since we developed them. But
the first one was mine.
This is one of yours, so you can start this one.
First, I just want to echo something Gordon said, that stopping by the first Smithers Farmers Market of the season was probably the deciding factor on why I moved to the Smithers area. So we shouldn't underestimate sometimes sort of the other appeals or other values farmers markets have, good farmers market, and just attracting or creating that incredible first impression of an area. If you happen to be there on farmers market day, and see how much is going on. So with Hazelton, right from our very first meetings, we decided that we were going to create, right off the bat, integrity for the market. We wanted it to be a farmer's market. There was already an existing sort of weekend-long, call themselves a farmer's market / flea market / country market that was happening in town. there was a few products, a few vendors that would have qualified in the make, bake, and grow. There was also Avon and Watkins. So we had a series of meetings through the first winter before the first season of the market, and we developed a pretty good set of make, bake, and grow rules, largely borrowed from our neighboring market, but right from sort of the opening day of the market, we wanted to follow the sort of tried and true sort of model of what works for a successful farmers market. So make, bake, and grow for a limited time, not 6 hours over 2 days, but 3 or 4 hours, to create that critical mass of getting all the vendors and all the customers there at the same time. And joining the BC Association of Farmers Markets and all the great resources they had to share with us, but also membership with the BCAFM gave us a lot of integrity as a new sort of building market, to say that we're a member of this organization, we have sort of the weight of the organization behind us. So I think that really helped us with advertising right off the bat, and especially with talking to our municipal governments and other people and trying to get support behind the market. We're not just a bunch of hippie backyard growers who wanted to get a market going, but we formed a society before we had our first market, and we did everything legit. But definitely a very strong set of rules right from the beginning, that you don't very quickly water things down. Like, yes, you are trying to attract as many vendors as possible, but it could be a very slippery slope if right off the bat you start to let sort of things encroach onto the core values of a market. It's very hard to back away from that. I think every community is different, and the market has to develop rules specific to your community. I'm also on the Bulkley Valley Farmers Market Board. I have been for the past 2 years, and it was a year-long process to really go through all the rules and really expand them, what it means to make something, what it means to bake something, what it means to grow something. And when you start to think about it, and just to have it try and make it transparent and clear across the board and clear for everyone. And it took hours and hours and hours of discussion to figure it out. It's not an easy one. But I think it's very specific to different communities. Hazelton has different requirements and some of those things.
To pick up on that theme of different communities requiring or having different needs. I actually come from a very different perspective on this issue, and I agree that it's important to have the policies, but specifically for the Lytton market, one of the issues that I felt was a problem with the market, or was causing problems at the market, is that the rules were being overzealously enforced in the Lytton market, and so vendors specifically were being turned off. And I've had a number of vendors say to me, as we've tried to rebuild it, that they just stopped coming because there were too many rules and people were not friendly, they weren't welcoming, and they were just constantly being bombarded with paper and new sheets from the health authority, and they didn't feel that it was worth. They were there in a sort of community spirit, and back to what I was saying about a community hub. But really, it is in Lytton. A lot of it is about meeting people and the social aspect of it. So we loosened the rules. And I was told by people like, well, no, we can't let so-and-so sell, who's selling these amazing apricots that he grows, but he's got a friend's salve that he didn't make. We can't let him sell that because we'll be thrown out of the association if we do that. They'll come. I was like a bit aghast that the Farmers Market Association would be sending out spies. But anyway, so we tried to find a balance that would work for people. so we came up with this concept of holiday markets where the rules were a little bit looser. And so most of the markets, the vast majority, 80%, are make-or-grow markets. But on holiday weekends, we allow people to sell other stuff. And you still have to have your own things that you're selling, but if you have you want to sell a few other things, that's okay. So, and we tried to do a lot of other things to bring vendors back. We gave free weeks. The fees are only $5, but even that can be a barrier. So we gave 3 weeks. We encouraged people to, as I said, we bought canopies because Lytton gets to 40 degrees. I think that, those kind of things, like transportation is a huge issue in Lytton. There's no public transport whatsoever. And there's a river, and half the community's on the other side of the river with a ferry, which is out up from 1 to 3 months a year, depending on how long the high water lasts. And that's where most of the farms are as well. So the farmers actually have to walk their stuff across pedestrian railway bridge. Pedestrian bridge next to it.
So I have 2 comments in regards to transportation. One is we are losing our bus this year, which is a shame. We've had a bus busing up to our market for 2 years, and this year we're not going to have it, which is optically very bad for the community. Like, it doesn't look good. The reality is sometimes 4 people a day took it. So financially, it's not really feasible, right? Everyone that thinks it's a good idea is everyone that drives to the market. So that's our challenge. The other thing I wanted to say is Air Canada has a transportation grant that you can apply for, and anyone can apply for it for local transportation. And I'm going to be applying for it as well, and they will fund transportation for community initiatives. So that's something good to apply for. The other thing is get to know the people who are distributing the coupons in your community. The people who are distributing the coupons can apply for transportation grants. I think it's $200 per community organization, which you could transition into maybe like a shared, maybe you can't do shuttle bus, but maybe some shared carpooling with gas money or something like that you can get creative on helping people get to the market.
Yeah, I think that's a great, and that transportation grant is, we did apply for that. The community partner did apply for that in our area. And that's really been, for us, that's the biggest bonus of the coupon program, is working with the Lytton First Nation. They're the community partner, the health department. And so it's brought us together in a way that we've never been able to before. And so for me, that partnership is really the key to the future of the market, because all of the young people in the area are First Nations. And soon, and so we need to get the next step of building people, growing food in that community. And I think that in any small community, this is going to be the case. No one group can do it alone. So that's a natural extension of any community group in a small community, is that you have to work with other community groups. But I think for farmers markets, it really makes a huge difference. And I'll just throw one thing out, because it was kind of cool that because of the coupon, the BC Farmers Market Coupon Association, with the Lytton First Nation Health Department, they also had a good food box bag program in another department, social development. And when they heard that we were getting coupons for the health department, they were like, well, why can't we get coupons? Because they were just buying stuff from Cisco and giving out bags of stuff from Cisco. So they got on board immediately with getting the food bags, at least in season, from the farmers, and with coupons and bags. And once those partnerships build, it can snowball pretty fast. That's crazy.
Yeah, I just want to echo Gordon's experience of how important the nutritional coupon program has been for the success of Hazelton. We've had it for the last 3 years now, 3 years since it's been back up and running. And it's really diversified our customer base. We're in a region of mostly Gitxsan First Nations people. They're the majority, and they were definitely the minority at the farmers market. Now it's probably more like half and half. So it's really sort of spread out our base to be more representative of the community that we serve. And also, it's brought a lot more money through the market, like a proportional, quite high amount compared to bigger markets of money that otherwise wouldn't be coming through the market. So it is directly supporting small farmers. And there are, I know, probably 2 vendors at Hazelton who would not be there without the coupon program. So that's one of the great sort of side benefits of the coupon program. And plus, through the coupon program, we work with other organizations with similar end goals in our community as well. So it also helps us foster relationships with other groups doing sort of working towards similar ends. A comment on working with nearby nearby markets. Close enough. I think John asked earlier if we're trying to compete directly with neighboring markets. The first few years we figured, Saturday mornings is market time. That works in Smithers, works in Terrace. We want to try and keep people from the Hazeltons in Hazelton. That doesn't work, and not necessarily because of competition from other markets. It's because we didn't realize that Saturday is just shopping day for when they leave Hazelton and they go to those bigger centres on Saturday. So we moved it to Sunday, and then sort of the byproduct of that move, then we're suddenly attracting a lot of Smithers vendors to vend in Hazelton on Sunday as well. So that was a very wise move that took us 2 years to figure out. And plus, by that point, some of our vendors, myself included, we needed other outlets for our personal produce, so we were going to those other neighboring markets on Saturday. So it allowed us to do both and to keep growing.
Yeah, we sort of had the opposite experience, which is that our market is on Friday, and as far as I know, it always has been, because if I ever talk to anybody about moving it, they say, it's always been on Friday, it's got to be on Friday. And that people leave on the weekend, so there's no point in having it on the weekend. And then we talked to the Lillooet people who have their market on Friday as well, which is now actually, it used to be much smaller than Lytton's, but now it's bigger. It does have more flea market-y type stuff as well, but it's got plenty of produce. And they actually took off when they moved it from Saturday to Friday, so they're not going to move theirs. And it is a problem for us, because we used to get vendors coming from Lillooet and shoppers coming from Lillooet. And that was, again, something that contributed to the problems of the market in the past. And that's something that we're trying to talk to the other markets, and can't really resolve it. So we're trying to work on other things, like having buskers go around to the various, trying to collaborate in other ways so that we're not, we recognize that we're not really competing, but the fact is that we are to a certain degree. But we're trying to explore other ways that we can work together besides changing the day or the hours. I've talked to people ever since before I got involved about changing the day and the time. The other thing that we're doing is similar to what you were saying, is we started, last year we had our first night market on a Wednesday night. And so we're going to try and build that aspect of it to have something else. But the fact is that we had some musicians, and the musicians cost more than we got in fees. The vendors were really happy because there were many vendors there, so they did really well. But that whole issue of competition of vendors is something that we're dealing with all the time, with backyard people, with their best friend who sells the same thing, and they both won't come to the market on the same day if they're both selling the same thing. It's just it's a whole different thing that you have to deal with in a small community, because they believe that there aren't enough customers to have two people selling apricots at the same time. And that's something that we have not been able to break through and convince people that the more apricots there are, the more people will come. And it's just, I don't know if anyone else has any solutions or ideas of how to, we tried okay, let's make it a feature and have Apricot Week, the Apricot Festival, whatever you want to call it. And I literally immediately got everybody bring their apricots. Let's make it a big. I got an email like the minute I put that on Facebook saying, please don't encourage people to bring their backyard apricots because I won't sell any of mine. And it's just like, oh, come on, one day, you gotta, it's people do depend on this money, as small as it is in this market.
We're into our last 5 minutes, so let's just jump to the very last
topic. The one that we always avoid because we never have time for it.
Yeah. So my number one comment I jotted down was aim to hire a manager. So it's not going to happen in the first few years that you start in the market. You need volunteers to run the market. But with your fees, your stall fees, your society fees, budget that within a few years you'll have something. It doesn't have to be $50 an hour, but you'll have something to pay a manager to do the job. We're tendering a contract this year for Hazelton for the first time to hire a manager. So we'll see how well that goes.
Okay, then you're no longer a small market if you're
Still less than 20 vendors.
That's one of my definitions.
Yeah. We'll see how well it works out. But it took us 6 years to get to this point. But our finances have been stable enough over the past 3 years that it should be good. If anyone wants a job.
Yeah, I just back to the chicken and egg thing. I don't think. Well, the experience in Lytton, I hate to be a downer again, but the chicken and egg thing never goes away. Like that's why the Survive was first, because I think in small markets it's so easy to get tipped onto that downward slope that you have to really be aware and catch it as soon as possible. And that's when I looked up there's some study from Oregon on why markets fail, and number one thing about it was having a paid manager. That was one of the most important aspects of keeping a market from failing, according to their surveys. So that is an important way to go. I don't mean to make a joke of it.
And it's also very important to try and spread the work, to have an engaged board and spread out the work. It's so easy, especially with a small market. It's much easier just to have one person do all the work. But over the long term, that's not good for the market, because that one person, as the market grows, it's going to burn out that one person, and it will be a big learning curve for everyone else to suddenly have to pick up everything that gets dropped. So as soon as you can, if you are sort of the main instigator of the market, as soon as you can, pass things off and involve people in the process of operating it and continuing to build it. Yeah, be very careful to think of repercussions of whatever changes you make, what negative effects that can potentially have in the market, and especially what negative effects making a change for one segment of the market can put on another one. Because especially in the markets that relatively early morning markets that I'm involved in, the early hours are vital for the farmers, the later hours are vital for the craft vendors. So, they're both really looking at quite different markets. So be very careful not to always just listen to the majority if it's going to have, quite dire or potential drastic effects on the supposed minority.
I think we're out of time, unfortunately. I really want to thank everybody not only for coming, but for participating, because it actually was a forum, which I'm really thrilled by. I was worried that it was just going to be us talking to each other or talking to the walls and nobody participating. So that it's really, really important, and it actually shows me another value of the association, to have this opportunity to network with people and throw around ideas. And yes, maybe you've tried them, but you didn't think of it this way or trying it that way, because it's really important that we support one another in that same kind of way of what we've tried, what works, what doesn't work, risks we can take, and so on. So thank you all.